Welcome to PodStep Pop-Up Studio. This is day 2 of STEP Conference 2024. We're having our first guest, Eric from Arrival. Eric, welcome, and tell me where you're coming from, what are you moderating today, how do you find STEP
Sure.
and Dubai in general?
So thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. It's a topic that I'm very passionate about. I guess the second thing is, I don't know what I was thinking coming to an outdoor conference in Dubai without sunglasses, and also why there's no sponsors that are giving out sunglasses. That seems like such an easy and obvious opportunity.
That's a great feedback, Steph.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I am on a panel later on today talking about how retail and e-commerce brands can drive disruptive growth. So it's myself and kind of 2 other marketers, and we're going to come at it from different angles, but I guess some of the context for that, and then also for our conversation today. So I started and now run a full-service marketing agency that's based between London and New York, but hopefully opening an office down here in Dubai relatively soon. We're boutique, we're about 20 people, but we focus on challenger brands. So the work that we do is typically marketing strategy or some execution on the creative and the paid media side, working with startups that are trying to scale and disrupt the category that they're in, or big incumbents like Jumeirah Hotels. We work with JP Morgan in the Middle East as well, Unilever, et cetera, on innovating or launching a challenger brand of their own. So we do a lot of work in the venture space as well.
Wow. So you tell me what's hot in marketing now. Okay, you're all the way from London to Dubai. You tell us what's hot in marketing.
What is hot in marketing? Well, I think the topic that we're going to talk about today, this kind of content-led, building a media company around your brand, certainly is. I mean, obviously everybody is talking about AI, and we could touch on that if it's relevant to the audience. In my opinion, I always think about that quote of, I think we overestimate what's going to happen in a year with new technology, and we underestimate what's going to happen in 10 years. So in my own experience with Rival and also with some of our clients on that, we've seen some applications for it, but really it's kind of a supplement to what you need to be doing anyway, as opposed to a full-scale replacement of anything new. So I think that's certainly one. More broadly than that, I really think that kind of not even next, but the current frontier of marketing is all about data and technology. So if you're thinking about, I know there's early stage businesses here for whom it might not be as relevant, but bigger companies, really the marketing department of the present and certainly the future has a lot more people with tech backgrounds, competencies, data science, etc. So I think that's a big one as well.
That's true. And what do you think? How is it really working in reality? Because we might actually, as you fairly mentioned, we might be aware like there's another new technology that is coming in. We're overestimating how important it is going to be, like when it comes to AI. But in reality, how does it work on the clients? Is it still more of a traditional kind of marketing, or how from your side and from your strategies, how do you implement new things?
So I think a couple things, and with conversations like this, I'm always trying to get to, I think you hear a lot of people talk on podcasts and conferences and stuff like that, and you kind of like nod your head along and you're like, okay, I agree with that, but you don't walk away actually knowing what you should do differently. So I try to get like really tactical with people, so I apologize if it gets kind of a little bit too detailed. But I think a couple things. I think the most important thing is to make sure that you are on the wave of whatever the new thing is.
Yeah.
Don't worry too much about the perfect boat that you should be building right now. Just get on it.
Yeah.
And so what that means with marketing, technology, and AI is very practically set aside an hour a week just to look into it. Start Googling what are the marketing AI tools right now. Just go down that rabbit hole. Just read some stuff, play around with some stuff, ask people about some stuff. You got to get a taste for it. Don't get left behind. I think the other thing practically, I mentioned that we have 2 podcasts, and the main one is a kind of one-on-one fireside chat with CMOs. So big brands, but also kind of startups that are disrupting the categories that they're in. We've done about 70 episodes of that. I hosted a FinTech CMO podcast in my last role where I was CMO of a FinTech business. So I've done about 100 CMO interviews over the last 3-4 years. And we did an insights show recently. What are the biggest learnings from interviewing 100 CMOs? And a lot of it is what you would expect.
Yeah.
Focus on the customer, get the right people on board, build the right culture within the marketing organization, et cetera. But the one that I put as number one, because of how frequently it came up and how simple, maybe not easy, but simple it is to actually implement, is that you need some type of framework to make sure that you are not only spending all of your time and money on what works right now, the kind of tried and true stuff that you're comfortable doing. So for example, I would recommend that everyone here put 5%, whether you have a $100,000 marketing budget or a $1,000 marketing budget, put 5% of that money and the time that you allocate towards marketing to testing and learning with something in the MarTech AI space, just something. But so many of the success stories that we heard from the CMOs that we've interviewed and the challenger brands that we're looking at come from this kind of innovation mindset and innovation budget.
Yeah.
So start with the structure of that. Just get into it. Just start spending time and money and see where it takes you. That'd be the other thing that I'd recommend for people.
Interesting. And are there any MarTech solutions that you personally are a big fan of?
So a lot of the work that we do on the strategy side is around customer data and marketing automation right now. Mm-hmm. I think particularly when it comes to performance, but to be honest, even on the brand and creative side, it is less about having a ton of kind of junior people at an agency or in your in-house team just doing these constant calibrations of everything, right? It's much more about how effective you are at collecting, cleaning, storing, drawing insights from, and then applying the customer data that you have into, as much as possible, an automated marketing machine. So with that, there's some really interesting customer data platforms that have come online in the last few years that I think are really good solutions. So we do a lot of work with mParticle, we do a lot of work with Braze. I would definitely check those out. Again, they're probably gonna be more relevant for like the mid-stage or certainly the corporate level businesses. There's also some really interesting technology coming out that's heavily AI driven on the creative side as well. So in a similar vein, if the traditional model, and for those who haven't worked in or with big agencies, it's amazing how old school so much of that world is. Like if you've seen Mad Men, which was about the 1950s, and
I did.
Oh my God, it is basically the same thing in many ways, right? But that's of course going to get really disrupted by technology. Mm-hmm. But like everything, it starts from the bottom up. It's not going to disrupt the chief creative officers and the creative directors, the people that are coming up with these big ideas, but it is going to disrupt the bottom, where you used to have floors of junior copywriters and art directors that would take a hero piece of content and then come up with 100 micro pieces of content to feed social and digital. A lot of that's going to get done by technology. So there's one called Pencil that we use, where we will take a hero video that's still created by either our team or an agency or a client team, feed that through to then produce a bunch of micro content that also can be pretty easily localized. Right. So particularly in this region, being able to take something that's in English, have it kind of localized to Arabic or something like that. So I'd check that one out as well.
Interesting. So I can hear that you are quite performance driven. So you were talking fairly about the data and how marketing is becoming really based on the technology and how many people are coming to marketing with a techie background. When it comes to the other topic that we're going to discuss now, building the media brand, do you agree that a lot of companies are not going into that space is because it's not that easy to measure the success of it? And tell me, what do you think, and how do you tackle that particular, let's say, barrier?
I think it is easy to measure.
Is it?
I think it depends on how you define success.
Right.
So let me take a step back. So the media company model for me. So I guess as a first principle, I believe that modern marketing, 100% for B2B businesses, but I think increasingly for B2C businesses as well, is more about thinking and acting like a media company rather than a traditional marketer. So to oversimplify and generalize, I would say that traditional marketing is about how do you extract value from the audience you're trying to reach? How do you get people to come to your store, come to your website, buy something, give you their data, etc.? The value exchange, or the focus of the value exchange, is from them to you. You know, I started my career, I randomly started my career in music and then nonprofit. Like, I have no formal background in marketing and business, so I should say that as a caveat. But I started, when I got into the digital marketing space, my first role was at Forbes. And actually it was Forbes.com back in the day when like the online part of the business was a completely different thing. And I was hired to quote unquote, like figure out social media for them, sign them up on Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff way back in the day. So I think being in a media business, really helped me understand how that business model works at scale. And fundamentally, a media company, their business model is focused on attention. They monetize attention. So they need to collect, engage, and then monetize people's time with them. And I think that's really interesting to apply to a marketing department, because if you are thinking and acting like a media company, that means that you are focused on how do you produce content, create experiences that add value to people such that they choose to spend time with you. So the focus of the value exchange is from you to them.
That's right.
Now, at the end of the day, I believe marketing is a means to an end. You invest in marketing, whether it's traditional marketing or this media company model, you do it because you want it to drive growth of your business. So it has to deliver those eventual commercial results. But I think with the media company model, the advantage that you have is that while everyone else is focused on extracting value from the audience, which means that they are producing content and experiences that typically aren't that relevant, valuable, and differentiated, if you're focused on them, you're much more likely to create content and experiences that they want to spend time with. And at the end of the day, if marketing is about how do you tell a story that changes perception and behavior to drive growth of your business, everybody focuses on the story. What's the campaign? What's the brand positioning? What's the content? But in order to tell somebody a story, you need their attention. And in the world of 2024, that is by far the most valuable and scarcest commodity to businesses.
Absolutely.
So I think you need a marketing model that's focused on attention first, which to me means thinking and acting like a media company.
In this case, do you think all our metrics that are typical for traditional marketing and the way we measure the success have to change, right? So if, for example, a company has started the media journey, let's say, has adopted this model, or can this be adopted partially? Like, for example, can we try, let's say, with 5-10% of the budget of the marketing to start acting as a media company and then gradually grow into a bigger one? Is this possible? Does this integrate with each other?
You can, but the biggest difference and the biggest factor is that you need to invest in it consistently for at least the medium, if not the long term, in order for it to pay off. Because essentially what I'm saying is that if you focus on adding value through content and events or experiences as opposed to extracting it, eventually you will build awareness, equity, and consideration that will then come back to you, right?
That's right.
But it is not short term, and it is not if you put $1 in here, you can track the dollar that comes back 90 days later. So to your question about metrics, I think it can be measured, but I think you need a supplementary set of metrics that are media company metrics, how much attention, what's the quality of that attention, et cetera. So metrics that a media company would have. And then you also need the marketing metrics. So I'll give you an example. My last role as CMO of a fintech business, and it was kind of a mid-sized company, it was about 150 people. The marketing team was about, I think 12 when I got there, so decent size. The first thing I did was split the marketing department in two. So about half of it was still marketing. So they managed the website, they did the PR, they worked with the sales team on generating MQLs and things like that. The other half of it, I hired someone who did not come from a marketing background. He came from a production agency background. And his job was to build a media company around what we stood for. So I told him, your metrics are not short-term business goals. They're not MQLs. They are, how big is the audience? What's the quality of that audience? And how engaged are they? The other thing that I said to him was, if you're able to monetize that audience like a media company would, through sponsorship, essentially.
That's right.
Anything that we generate through that, we'll put straight back into the media company.
Yeah.
The media company ended up being a 7-figure revenue line for the business. So there's a really interesting conversation here, which is hard to get to. But if you can get to scale with the media company model, you have the opportunity for marketing to become a profit center, not a cost center within the business.
I think he mentioned something really, really important that it's not like a lot of companies miss that. It's more about that marketing in general. If you look at this region specifically, doesn't get that much attention. So, and I think the core thing that you mentioned, that you build a structure, the marketing department structure that allowed you to actually separate these two things into mainstream, into different streams, and that's the core. And I think process and the existing processes are what kills the media aspect of any brand in the B2B space currently.
Yeah, and I actually think the biggest thing is that most businesses are not willing or able to focus on the long term. They just want to focus on what's going to generate an immediate impact for the business. And I don't think, in the consulting work that we do, I don't think this model is right for everybody, because it does take a certain financial position and a certain commitment
for sure
to do this the right way, because the worst thing is to be stuck in the middle, to kind of do it halfway, where you're kind of trying to act like a media company, but really you're trying to extract value from the audience, because then you're not going to create content that's relevant and differentiated, so you might as well just focus on the short-term marketing. So it's not right for everyone. I mean, for us in Rival, we started a little bit more than 2 years ago, and we were a bootstrap company at the time, and we hired an executive producer pretty early, an associate producer. We have a post-production agency. We do
Right.
2 podcasts, email newsletters, monthly and quarterly event. Like, we've put a lot into it. And for me, I said, I'm going to track media company metrics, but I am not going to look at or expect this to drive commercial returns for our business for the first 2 years.
right.
And so that's kind of hard to do. Like, you really have to have commitment
That's
to that.
true, and belief. And when did it return though? 2 years or earlier?
It's starting to now. It depends on how you measure it. We're not in a spot where everybody's banging down our door because of listening to the podcast. But there's kind of like anecdotes. I got a call on the way over here. Somebody reached out from Melbourne, Australia, who found our podcast and really liked it. The dinners that we do. And actually, probably the biggest thing has been kind of this community that we've created. So we have about 250 CMOs.
There we
It's
go.
like a WhatsApp group. And that's really interesting because, we can touch on the community thing and something that might be helpful for people, because I think this is
sure.
another buzzword
Absolutely,
that people
yeah.
talk about. So to me, everybody talks about building community, but again, I think they're still focused on how do I extract value. The difference between community and an audience, and I've heard this said, I forget who said it, but I really liked it. The difference between a community and an audience is which way the chairs are facing. Meaning, if it's an audience, it's you talking to them. Traditional marketing, even the media company model, it's producing content but then distributing it one to many.
Yeah.
If you're a community, you're creating the platform or the stage for people to then interact with each other and get value from that.
Yeah.
So for example, with our CMO community, which is mostly WhatsApp based, but we do some events as well, I'm not, first of all, I can't even keep up with all the conversation that's happening in there now. And most of the value is from people posting and getting answers from each other.
Yep.
Where could I find a resource on this? I'm dealing with this challenge. I'm looking for a new hire. So we've created a platform where people are getting value from each other, but also it's within the context of the Rival brand. So when they get value from that, they know that it's coming from us. So we
Totally.
have that awareness and hopefully are building that equity as well.
No, you're absolutely right. But can you tell me which platform are you using to maintain that community in terms of?
We're just using WhatsApp.
WhatsApp.
So, I get this question from a lot of people.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of communities
Practical.
on Slack, and there's kind of standalone apps that people can use as well. I think the biggest thing, going back to how I think attention is the scarcest and most valuable commodity, nobody wants to download another app. At least I don't want to join another Slack group.
Absolutely.
So you need to focus on, at least in the beginning, the lowest friction, the lowest barrier to participation,
Yeah.
to get people to spend time on your community, and then it's really just about delivering as much value as possible. If the value is there, people will spend time with it. As a one-off mini rant, one of the things that I fundamentally disagree with is the whole conversation about how attention spans are getting shorter. Mm-hmm. I'm no psychologist. I don't think it's about the human brain changing. I think it's about the unbelievable supply of content that's out there. I mean, just think about it. Compared to where it was 10, certainly 20 years ago, people don't have to spend time with bad content if they don't want to. So
that's
if they don't
true.
like something in the first 10 minutes, or
Absolutely.
they only see your brand logo for the first 6 seconds, they're going to click out. You have to focus on adding value. But if it's there, people will spend time with it.
I absolutely agree with you. It's not about the amount of content, it's about the amount of really bad content that is coming through. And yeah, I agree. So, I like the way this conversation unpacked. One of the last questions, just to wrap it up. So you mentioned that media model is not really for everyone. Totally fair. Let's just wrap it up. What are the attributes of, let's say, a company or a business that, in your opinion, is ready for a media model marketing?
I think you need a certain amount of scale or commercial support, kind of cash, to be able to invest in the resources it takes to produce good content without expecting it to drive a short-term return. So that's one. Just practically, you need the money to be able to do it, right? I think you also need the, strategic commitment or belief. For marketers who are listening, I think we can all relate to and have been in those conversations of trying to convince your CEO and CFO that you should invest in brand. Some organizations are not just brand, they're just not brand oriented. They're not marketing oriented. So you going to the CEO and CFO and saying, hey, I want to invest in this media company model for the next probably not going to happen. So you need a certain amount of buy-in. And I think for marketers listening or for non-marketers looking to hire marketers, as someone who's had a couple CMO roles, that's a big thing that I'm looking for when I'm interviewing or talking to people, is what is their perspective and commitment to this type of approach. So I'd really keep an eye out for that. Beyond that, I really think that it is again, I'm trying to get practical here. I'm going to go back to what you said of could you do this with 5%? I think you can, but the problem is that there's such a long payoff. Most of the time, if you're trying to prove a use case within an organization by taking that, hey, just give me 5% of the budget, let me pilot something here, probably people aren't going to be okay, just let me know how it goes in 2 years. They're going to want to see results from that in 3 or maybe 6 months, which is a little bit harder. So I think there is still a way to do it. And what I would say with that is that if you think about content, or a framework for content as being, there's kind of the baseline content that builds up over time, the weekly podcast, the bi-weekly email, etc., or the breakthrough content that maybe you do a few times a year, big white paper, big event, whatever, or hero hub hygiene is another framework for it. The baseline content, the hygiene content, is the one that's really the long-term investment. That's the one where it's if you're going to start a podcast now, beyond maybe using it to reach out to your prospect to start a relationship by getting them on the podcast, which is, I think, a little bit cheeky. If it's really about how can you scale the audience so that eventually it drives inbound and awareness, that's a super long-term investment. But the hero stuff, the breakthrough stuff, could you do a guerrilla activation at Step? Could you do a CXO invite-only private roundtable dinner? That's the stuff where there is the opportunity for it to still be about adding value, but also maybe more of a shorter medium-term return because you're standing out a little bit more. And usually with those types of things, you're kind of building a relationship more directly with people. Okay, right, yeah. Thank you so much. It's been really, really insightful, valuable. It's great to hear the point of view, a very comprehensive point of view on the media sort of model, because everybody tends to say, yeah, it's popular and let's all do it, and then they stop somewhere at the beginning or in the middle. And at the same time, there are people who reject it completely without even trying or thinking to that direction. So thank you so much for the input. I think it's been a remarkable value from this conversation. Thank you for stopping by, Eric, and really
good luck with Step and your panel.
Yeah,
today.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.